Cool. I think we'll get cracking because we've got a pretty packed agenda. So super exciting. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm Gaurav, the marketing director here at the Electric Car Scheme. Thanks so much for taking the time to sign up and join us for the webinar today, titled Use Electric Cars Should You Drive One? So just a bit of housekeeping to get us started. We are a startup, so we're using Google Meets. Appreciate this isn't a traditional webinar format, but if you keep microphones and videos off, that would be great. Also, throughout the session, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box in the bottom right, and we've got a brief Q&A at the end. If there are any questions we don't get to, we will basically respond to those on email and send a big email around to everyone. Also, just want to flag the session is being recorded. Again, if you don't want to be on the video or the recording, turn your videos off. It will then be featured on our YouTube channel as well as being emailed around to everyone. Cool. So a brief intro into us at the Electric Car Scheme. We're on a mission to make net zero the obvious choice. One way we're doing that right now is through electric cars by making them more accessible with salary sacrifice. By doing so, we enable people to save 20 to 50% on the cost of a new, or in this case, a used electric car. Until recently, salary sacrifice has always been on new cars, but today we're one of the leading providers in this space who offer used cars via salary sacrifice. And we deliver hundreds of these cars every single month. It's a big step forward in making EVs more accessible to everyone and helping people essentially make that green choice when potentially they were priced out of it before. Just some fun stats for you all. 80%-ish of UK car sales are for used cars traditionally, and there's 50 to 60% of those buyers who are looking at EVs, and particularly used ones, are concerned around battery health and other condition bits as well. So the session today will cover the growing used EV market, why it's booming, what to look out for, how to approach things like battery health, insurance, total cost of ownership, and all that other stuff as well. So we've got 45-minute discussion with the panel, and then we'll have a brief 10-15-minute Q&A. We've had some questions in advance of the webinar, so we'll run through some of those, and we'll also try and take some live as well, which will be really exciting. So let's get started. And on to meeting the panel to get us kicked off. I'd like to firstly introduce Ryan from the Electric Car Scheme. Ryan, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan. I'm the EV Sales Director at the Electric Car Scheme. I've been with the Electric Car Scheme now for just shy of 6 months. And prior to that, I've got around about 20 years experience within the automotive industry, working for brands in the VAG group, such as Volkswagen and Audi. In the last 7 years prior to joining ECS, I worked for Select Car Leasing, who were one of the largest leasing brokers and providers in the UK. And as part of that, I was on the forefront of the strategy towards EV adoption within vehicle leasing, and also was on the pilot plan for one of the finance providers who offer used car leasing as it is today, and it's one of the providers that we also offer as part of the Electric Car Scheme.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Dinal, over to you.
Thanks, G. So I'm Dinal. I've been at the Electric Car Scheme for about 2 months longer than Ryan, so I'm still a baby here, 8 months in. I'm the product lead at the Electric Car Scheme, so I look after a lot of what engineering is responsible for. I've been in the EV space for about coming on 3 years now. Before I was at the Electric Car Scheme, I was at ZapMap. If you don't know ZapMap look after, or they map all of the public charging infrastructure in the UK. At ZapMap, I looked after the locations data. So that was really about integrating all of the vast amount of chargers in the UK onto ZapMap's back end and making those available via our app and via our B2B provision. What I really like to get into is user behavior and the kind of attitudes towards EV adoption. So spend a lot of my time interviewing drivers, and then I've sort of brought that into what I'm doing here at ECS.
Perfect, thank you. And on to Cameron next.
Cheers, Gaurav. Afternoon, everyone. I do not work at the Electric Car Scheme. I work at a business called ClearWatt. We're also a startup. We operate in the EV data and battery health space. My background is very technical. I'm a mechanical engineer. I spent a number of years working in deep battery research at Imperial College London. So working with their batteries group to look into the science behind degradation, why it occurs, what you can do to manage it, what you can do to monitor it. Worked on some quite interesting projects with the OEMs themselves, helping them to improve their battery pack designs, to manage and to mitigate degradation. After leaving research, I set up my own business in the micromobility space, developing universal charging tech for e-scooters and e-bikes. And then I joined ClearWatt just over 2.5 years ago to lead on the development of our suite of products. And those products are principally aimed at helping consumers navigate the transition to used electric vehicles. So we've got our mobile app, we have our website, and we have a suite of APIs and data services that tie in with all of that stuff. So yeah, I look forward to sharing some of my experience on battery health and real world range. Those are sort of two key topics that come up when consumers are looking to buy used electric vehicles.
Perfect, nice one. And finally, over to Angela.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hi, I am Angela. I'm a freelance marketeer focusing on EVs and sustainability. I've made the transition to electric for 5 years now, but I feel like I've been saying 5 years for years, so it's probably longer than that. I create educational content by driving electric up and down UK and Europe to encourage people and make people feel confident when they transition to electric.
Perfect, lovely, nice to have you guys all on, and looking forward to a really, really good discussion. So we'll get cracking. I guess the first bit we want to look at is why now? Why the rise of the used EV market? So Ryan, kicking off with, what are the top reasons people are choosing used EVs right now, and what do you see when you're selling EVs and speaking to people day to day?
Yeah, sure. I think the main reason and the big reason is price. And that price point that used EVs is now able to attract, it definitely makes it more affordable and more accessible. And what we're finding now with the leasing providers that offer used car schemes is that there's a wide range of choice. The vehicles are typically anywhere between 6 months to 4 years old. Multiple brands, multiple specifications, and multiple price points. So there's a real good sort of variety that kind of caters for everyone's needs and requirements and price points. The other reasons why it's really, really popular is the transparency that we're able to offer. As part of entering into a used EV contract, we're able to give and provide images and information on the actual condition of the vehicle, and the condition of these vehicles are prepared to an extremely high standard, which we can come on to a little bit later, but we're able to share that. And also the process as well. The process is very, very quick. We're able to reserve vehicles quickly, deliver vehicles quickly. Technically, all the vehicles that we're offering have all gone through preparation standards and are readily available to sell. So typically we can provide vehicles within a 2 to 3 week turnaround in the right circumstances.
And are there still long lead times on new cars, would you say? And that's another reason to go used?
I think new lead times are certainly in a better place than they were. I think we've definitely had some issues post-COVID during and also with the UK and Ukraine and Russian conflict. There was some problems there around supply. Core materials such as steel, wiring looms, that kind of stuff did really have an impact on new. It's definitely coming back around now, but depending on what you're after, some things can take up to 6 months. Providing the used vehicle is there, again, you could have it within 2 to 3 weeks, and obviously the quality of that is excellent.
Nice. And I guess Dinal, Cameron, two-part a bit for both of you. And to Ryan's point on used cars, how has supply, price drops, and residual value trends shaped the market? Should we start with Cam first there?
Yeah, I mean, market dynamics over the last 3 to 4 years have been very interesting on the used side. There was a high number of new EVs that entered the market back in 2020, 2021 with the introduction of salary sacrifice. And those vehicles typically were sold on 3 or 4 year lease deals. And so those vehicles in the last year, 2 years have now started trickling onto the used market. And that has actually had a really positive impact for consumers looking to buy used EVs, because with an increase in supply comes price drops. And there has been, quite sizable drops in RVs for residual values for used electric cars. I'd like to think that they are now stabilizing, and we're getting some, it was a market correction back in 2023, and that those prices are now stabilizing. So I think overall it's a really good time now to get your hands on a used electric vehicle. The pricing for both outright purchasing and leasing is really, really attractive.
Nice. Dinal, anything to add there as well?
Yeah, I think Cameron's hit the nail on the head there. We all see it when we're driving more and more and more EVs on the road. You see them constantly. And it's just because so many have been being sold. And what we're seeing now is those same cars are starting to enter the used market. I think the other aspect of this is this rapid increase and Cameron knows all about this battery technology, the health of these batteries and the performance of these batteries. And so that does mean that the residual values of these cars that Cameron's talking about is fluctuating so much and occasionally going down. For the consumer, that's great. Prices are dropping. There's more and more used EVs on the market, so much more competitiveness with these prices. And so it's just the best time to buy, better time than any time before, to get an EV for a really, really good price. For the person selling the used EV, less fun. And I think that's where leasing comes in. If you're looking to enter the used EV market at the moment, perhaps buying outright your own EV isn't the best idea until the fluctuation of those residual values has kind of stabilized. Better to come in, and this isn't me selling ECS, this is me selling leasing in general. Better to come in, try an EV for about 2-3 years, not have to worry about selling that on at the end of the lease.
Nice, great. Cheers, guys. And on to Angela here from your perspective and all the communities you're a part of. Why do you think people are turning more to used EVs?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. I think prices are one of the biggest factors. We all want to save money, but I'm hearing more and more people feel that used EVs have been de-risked. I feel for so many years, people didn't know what to expect. They would get a new used car and then they would think I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. But now they've seen it. They've seen neighbors driving it. They've seen friends, taxi drivers driving it all the time. So they could see it works. I think they've also learned that EVs are simpler to run and maintain, cheaper at the same time. And one group I've seen are leaning more into the used EV market is single car households and women in general, because not only you can get a safe, cheaper car, but you can also get a better spec car than you would if you were to buy a new one. So I think that's a win.
Yeah, definitely. The price point on some of the super expensive brand new, electric cars, not going to name any names, but we know some of the, the more performance level ones, and the way the value dropped so significantly, so quickly, that's enabled people to then access really premium cars, at a really good price point. So super interesting point.
Exactly that. And just to make a point on that is with new electric cars, they lose value very quickly in less than a year. So if you just wait a year, you can get a really nice car, pretty much brand new, but for a lot less money.
Yeah, definitely. So on to the next section, just conscious of time, I want to keep us to time. The big topic, I guess, and the one most people are interested in, and there's a lot of media misconception around this, is battery health and what to look out for. So Cameron, as our resident or panel expert here, there's a couple of questions for you. But what's the biggest kind of misconception around used EV batteries?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think, as you alluded to there, I think battery health and batteries lasting a long time is definitely up there on people's minds. I think linked to that, range. Am I going to get the range that I need? And then there's a safety aspect to it as well. I think that some people genuinely fear that the EV battery is going to catch fire on them, and they feel that as that car gets used, that the likelihood of that happening increases. So I guess I'll pick away at battery health to start with. Just so everyone on the call is aware about what we're talking about when we're talking about battery health. Roughly a third to 40% of the value of an EV is in its battery, and naturally, due to both just time and usage, the performance of that battery will drop, similar to iPhones and consumer electronics. And the reasons for that happening are quite complex. But fundamentally, there's not necessarily things that people are necessarily doing wrong. This is a natural process. And that's the way that surfaces itself for the EV driver is that they may not be able to achieve the same driving range that they could when the car was brand new. And so what you're thinking about there when you're looking to buy or lease a used EV is, okay, what is the actual current real world range that I'm going to get from this car, and is it going to fit my lifestyle? That's the kind of those are the key questions that people need to be asking and seeking out information for. And when you're talking about real world range, there's a lot of things that can influence that. How the car is driven, the conditions in which it's driven, the terrain. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So consumers should be asking questions like, what sort of range am I going to get in the winter? Maybe on the motorway, if I do a lot of motorway driving. Likewise, what's the best I could get? What am I going to get in summer if I'm doing a lot of city driving? Lower speeds. So yeah, I think getting transparency on battery health is something that we are trying to tackle with our product set at ClearWatt. People looking to buy those used EVs or lease those used EVs, they need to know what condition those batteries are in before they make any sort of purchasing or leasing decision.
Nice. And the second part to that question, I know you mentioned iPhones there, and I see that kind of analogy thrown around a lot in the media, again on LinkedIn and these things. You wouldn't buy a secondhand iPhone from someone without knowing what the battery health is, and you do a quick check and all that sort of stuff. So I guess what is actually being done to measure battery health, in this industry, and what tools can people use and should use? This is clearly a plug for your business here, so feel free to
well, before I talk about the sort of ways in which you can measure battery health and quantify it, I think that another big misconception here with EVs around battery health is that the batteries degrade heavily. And the reason that people are thinking that is because they're used to consumer electronics. They're used to their iPhone in their pocket. They're used to their laptop, whatever. They're used to seeing that battery health drop off. I've had iPhones where I've been down to 75% within 3 years. That's not the case with EVs for a number of reasons. They've got a lot of technology built into them to actually manage that degradation. That mostly comes about through careful temperature control. Your mobile phone sits in your pocket most of the time next to your leg. That's probably about 37 degrees. And that's not actually optimum for a battery. They like to be at sort of room temperature, and EVs have got a lot of technology built into them to ensure that they do get kept at that room temperature. In terms of measuring battery health, there are a number of different ways you can measure battery health. All the way from when I was back at Imperial, we'd be taking battery packs into the lab and we'd tear them apart, and we'd look at cell by cell analysis on battery health. In the real world, that is not possible. That is not a scalable solution. It's extremely expensive, and actually it would end up ruining the manufacturer warranty anyway on those batteries. So the solutions that have come to market that aim to monitor battery health at scale can probably be divided into two categories. One is through onboard OB, so onboard diagnostic port checks. So that's where people will try and read the car's own assessment of battery health, and that figure is normally read from what's called the battery management system. The battery management system will keep a record of what it thinks its battery health is. For a number of reasons, those values should not be relied upon in isolation. The accuracy of those values can really vary depending on which manufacturer you're talking about. There's no standardization there. The regulation is coming, but there's no regulation yet to standardize how people are measuring that battery health and how it's, the algorithms that are being used. So that's the first kind of camp of how you can surface battery health. The second camp is actually through testing and through driving the vehicle or through charging the vehicle. And those are the two methodologies that we use at ClearWatt. We have our mobile app that actually measures the performance of the vehicle as it's being driven, and likewise the performance of the vehicle as it's being charged. And that gives you effectively what you're doing there is you're looking at the real world effects of battery health. A drop in range, a drop in battery capacity. Hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, super useful and a lot to think about. I guess over to Dinal on the electric car scheme, as one of the key leasing players who we're leasing a bunch of electric cars, used electric cars at all times. How do we think about battery health, when surfacing that data and helping our customers make good decisions there?
Yeah, it's an important question. For us, it's so important that we give consumers as much transparency at the point of purchase and when they're shopping, so they have that confidence going into their lease and assurance that there's not going to be that degradation, that they're going to get the range that they need. Lex Auto Lease, who are our main used car provider, do their own battery health checks. And they won't send those cars forward to us unless it's meeting a minimum 85% standard. So already you have that kind of minimum base. What we found, though, was that kind of battery check wasn't as consumer facing as we wanted it to be. Yes, it's 85% of the battery health. What does that mean for me as the driver? How is that going to affect my range? And that's why, again, not to plug ClearWatt, but that's why we partnered with ClearWatt, who really do provide, I guess, the most sophisticated and, let me use the term, bleeding edge technology in this space, the best analytics of batteries and the best estimations on actual models and registrations, right? So we've now got that coming through. So you've got that minimum standard of 85%, but you've also got a sense of what that 85% actually means and a very, very, very accurate estimation against the specific car, against the registration, using the mileage that car has done to give you a sense of, well, this is what the range is going to be, and not just the range as a single number against that WLTP range, but also in different conditions. And I think that goes so far for giving consumers that assurance that they need.
Nice. Shoot over to Angela. And from your personal EV driving experiences, I know you've done some pretty mega road trips in EVs. What's been your experience with battery performance and range overall when driving in real conditions, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I've been driving my car for like 5 years or more now, and who knows me knows I'm not a gentle driver. I like my cars, I like to drive, and I've driven on all sorts of different roads. I've driven in the winter, I've driven in the summer, I've driven in the UK, abroad, good roads, bad roads, and I've gone down to 0% battery way too many times, that I like to say. To be fair, on that point, I've never been scared in the UK because I know there's a charging point at every corner. In Europe was a different story. I'm not going to go into that too much. I think, yeah, so over time, you're going to experience dips, but it's not in terms of like, initially I have 350 miles range and then it goes down to 150. It's not like a huge drop. It's like your phone. Over time, it will go down, but not dramatically. And most EVs have a buffer now. So even when it says 0%, you still have something left, thank God. But just check before, depends on the car, because I think different cars have more and others have less. I think the biggest takeaway, if the car has been looked after properly, and you talked about you have different apps that you have different ways to check, do a proper health check, then you know what you're getting yourself into. It doesn't come as a surprise. So you don't let that fear of the unknown not stop you from making the switch, because things can happen if you drive a hybrid. Things can happen if you drive an ICE car as well as an electric car. But it's just how you look after it. And I think maybe on the previous points that I'd like to add maybe a little challenge is, one of the misconceptions is that people don't know enough to have misconceptions. So how do we take all this information that you've just shared to put it out into the world in digestible terms. That I'm not a technical person, and if you come to me and you say, well, 80% is going to last you for like this loads of numbers and percentages, that's not going to make sense to me. So how do we make it more human?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a big challenge for everyone in this industry who works in it day in, day out. The misconceptions around EVs, full stop, whether used or new, charging availability, all that stuff, there's just so much in the media. I keep going back to media, but I've got a Google alert set up and I see it all the time. And it's our job and kind of our mission, all our respective companies to put out the positive message, right, and try and educate as best we can, because there won't always be the use case for an EV. It might be an alternative fuel is better for where you live or your journeys you're doing, all that sort of stuff. But the way the technology is progressing with, battery technology, real range, as we've discussed, it's getting really advanced now, where people kind of can't say no to it.
Yeah,
which is super interesting.
The thing is, in the UK, even if you don't have a home charger, I've never had a home charger, so I've only relied on public charging for years. And I used to have an E208 with 160 miles range, realistically, the way I drive. And I used to do 200 plus mile every other day. One charge would take me there, one charge would take me back. And you start to play with the region braking, you start to learn your car, you know where the charging points are, and you just adapt. It's a different mindset, because for so many years, we've driven cars where you have to go to a petrol station, fuel up, and you leave. You have to go there and it's done. Versus with charging, it's different. You go to the shop, you can plug in and top up your charge. You do different things. It's a different lifestyle, and I think it's just a mindset switch.
Yeah, definitely agree. The only thing we can't support is driving on 0%, because that's a completely unknown experience, unless you're feeling particularly daring and exciting. But I'm going to move us on to the next section. So appreciate the audience and the people that are attending. We've got a mixture of people, customers of the electric car scheme, some of our clients from the scheme operators that have the scheme in their businesses, as well as people who are just more broadly interested in used EVs. So what we're going to do for the next part is just talk through the cost saving elements more broadly on used EVs, and then how salary sacrifice works in tandem with those cost savings as well. So going to hand over to Ryan, because this is where it might feel like it gets slightly complex. But Ryan, we say you can save 30 to 50% by going used, and then another 20 to 50% with salary sacrifice. So can you walk us through how that works in reality?
Yeah, of course. And I will try my best to not make this sound like a sales pitch, but I'll give you the facts of how it works, and we'll go from there. So yeah, we talked briefly about the savings that you can make by going down the used route, but you can then get an additional 20 to 50% saving by going down the salary sacrifice route. And that 20 to 50% is completely dependent on your income tax banding based on what your personal salary attracts. And what we do with this is we take the gross cost of a lease on a monthly basis, and that gross cost is essentially deducted from your salary before any taxable deductions are made, and that's essentially where the saving is had for you. The other thing around salary sacrifice is that to HMRC, it's technically classed as a company car, so therefore it attracts benefit in kind tax. Benefit in kind tax currently this year is 3%. That is going to ramp up slowly to 9% by 2030. But in theory, you can salary sacrifice an internal combustion engine as well. It's nowhere near as lucrative, because and by 2029, 30, the internal combustion benefit in kind tax is going to be 39%. So that eats into the saving quite dramatically, which is why going down the used market is very, very lucrative from a tax perspective as well. With it being a company car, there's also a couple of things to consider as well. The contracts that we offer are fully maintained. Insurance is optional. And depending on circumstances, from a personal perspective, entering into a salary sacrifice agreement is that you don't have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to commit a large initial payment in order to get a car and kick off an agreement. And also, again, with it being a company car, it's not a personal credit check or credit agreement. So depending on the right circumstances, if you're in a position where you want to keep your credit line available for other things, or if you're even going through something like a mortgage application, for example, this going down this route, because it's the company essentially doing the credit on your behalf, and it doesn't essentially affect any of that. So again, based on the right circumstances, that's also quite a good selling point to it.
Nice. That was a good test of your knowledge of salary sacrifice as well, which is always a good one. But second part, Ryan, to the question on, I guess, used cars and used leasing. Is leasing, the best way, or are there, based on RVs and residual values, how do we think about that, and how should people think about it?
Sure. I think right now, used EV ownership or usage, I think leasing is definitely the best route forward right now. What we're finding is that the tech is changing constantly. We're in a position now to offer new cars where we're going to market with ranges of up to 500 miles, being able to charge the vehicle from 10 to 80% within 10 to 15 minutes in some cases. These first generation of EVs didn't have that capability. And because of that, because it was the first generation, a lot of the finance companies who are now offering these programs, we're not sure where the residual values were gonna lie. So therefore, what they've not wanted to do is essentially, dispose of the vehicles and take significant losses and basically resoliciting them with a used car program. So I think right now, in terms of value and all the things that we talked about in terms of like battery health and transparency and condition, I think it's definitely a very, very viable option to get yourself into an electric vehicle for a very, very affordable cost. I think in the future, when the tech improvements come along, I think the EV/RVs will definitely stabilize. And I think in the future, ownership will also become a very, very viable route to get into one. But I think right now, with it being an ever-changing climate and never changing in terms of the tech upgrades, I think it's best to not kind of risk putting your money into one. That essentially becomes a problem for somebody else if you go down the leasing market.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure can.
Because you mentioned, you talking big savings. It's you get 30 to 50% for going for a used car, but then add another 20 to 50% if you're going through salary sacrifice or different other options, which is amazing. But it might sound a bit too good to be true. So are there any hidden costs or limitations people should know before buying, before paying up front? Like you've mentioned insurance, that can be an extra added to your monthly price, but is there anything else like mileage caps or early exit fees that might surprise people that are buying a new car?
Yeah, good question. I hear that a lot in terms of, is salary sacrifice too good to be true? In terms of everything that we've just gone through, that is absolutely the case. Is there a pence per mileage penalty for going over mileage within the contract? Yes, there is. Is there any sort of penalties for excessive damage when the vehicle is returned to the finance company? Yes, there would be, but if anyone's kind of worried about that, if they refer to the BVRLA fair wear and tear guide, you can get some comfort in terms of what is expected when the vehicle returns. What finance companies are not expecting here are vehicles to look like they did when they were delivered if they were brand new. There is an acceptable fair wear and tear, which I think is pretty fair.
Thank you.
Nice. I'm just going to move us on quickly for a question for Cam here. So say you don't decide to salary sacrifice and you find yourself in a forecourt looking at used EVs. What's some kind of top tips for people to think about or look at when making that decision?
Yes. I think it's a good question, Gaurav. My first bit of advice there is to seek out a dealership that is something called EVA approved. So it's an electric vehicle approved. those are dealerships who have taken the time to provide additional measures and go to additional effort to make the experience of buying a used electric car easier for consumers. So there's a series of sort of standards and criteria points that they need to meet as a dealership in order to become EVA approved. But effectively that links to things like after sales, having on-site charging, having the correct information about the car, the way in which data is displayed. I would try and seek out dealerships who are EVA approved. You can use AutoTrader to find those dealerships. AutoTrader has a sort of built-in integration there where they will show you which of their dealers, which of their retailers actually have that accreditation. So that'd be probably my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice was obviously all around battery health and transparency. Try and find dealerships who are using battery health providers and who are trying to improve the data that they're giving to consumers about those used cars. Try and find dealerships who will give you as much sort of hand holding as possible, making sure that the charging cable is in the boot of the car, that you've actually got a charging cable in there. Talking maybe about like software upgrades. Is this car still receiving software upgrades? EVs are pretty much software on wheels. So that's again something that consumers should be wary of is making sure that their car is still being well maintained by the manufacturer. Those would probably be my initial bits of advice there.
Is there anywhere for people to look at? You talk about software upgrades and various other parts to look for when browsing. Is there like some way that people can look at for that information?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately going to have to shamelessly plug ClearWatt here, because one of the products that we have offered out to the market, and it's a product that is pretty squarely aimed at both consumers and retailers, is an independent, comprehensive report that will highlight the real-world range of the vehicle, whether or not the vehicle is still receiving software upgrades, how much it's going to cost to charge that vehicle at various different locations, how long it's going to take as well, so cost and the duration. There's a whole host of really useful data on that product. So yeah, seek out a ClearWatt report for that vehicle before you buy it, basically, because we can give you all that information that you need before making any purchasing decision.
Cool, awesome. We'll include a link to ClearWatt in the email we send as a follow-up, so people can have a look there. Just conscious of time, so I'll move us on to the next section: how to choose the right used EV. And Dinal, what at ECS, what support do we give buyers versus going it alone, and how do we make that process as smooth as possible?
Yeah, so I mean, what we see is a quarter of people generally are willing to buy online, but most people buying a used EV or a car generally want to speak to a human, want to speak to a person rather than get that kind of human touch. And actually with EVs, that's the amount of people going into a dealership is actually increasing, because I guess there's that uncertainty and they need that assurance. So on our side, I think the thing that answers that is we have Ryan's team, which is our EV specialist team, who know the tech, who know the cars inside out, and are really able to give people who are online and shopping a lot more information, really comprehensive domain knowledge about EVs, able to answer all of those questions. And that team is so important for us. The human side of the business is everything. On top of that, I think what ECS offers, on top of what I mentioned earlier with that minimum standard of battery health checks in our partnership with ClearWatt, for a buyer, when you're coming into this space, there's so much peripheral stuff to do. That's generally true with cars. But where EVs are different is it's the charging, right? And getting a hold of a charger is an additional cost. It's, as Angela was alluding to earlier, there are additional costs, not via our scheme, but just in driving an EV generally. And I think being able to get that charger via the salary sacrifice scheme makes such a difference. You don't have to go and do that shopping. You don't have to go and do that research. We're able to do that for you. We're able to provide that. But B, you're making that massive tax saving because it's coming out of your gross as part of the salary sacrifice scheme.
I guess, like, coming back to what Angela said about the potential misinformation, not misinformation, but education piece. if someone wanted to test drive a car and they're an ECS customer, what should they do in that situation?
I would say it's so important for a lot of people to test drive a car. Get yourself to a dealership. Get your eyes on the cars that you want to do, the range of models that you're considering. Speak to our EV specialist to refine that shortlist, and then find yourself a local dealership, which has the relevant accreditations that Cameron was talking about, and they will be more than happy to put you in a car so you can test drive it and then come back to the scheme or wherever it is that you're looking to buy a car to get that better price.
Yeah, it's a bit fun, that one. Just go to the dealership, have a browse, and then save loads of money with us. I think that's what we're trying to say there. But yeah, we appreciate that dealership experience can be quite overwhelming, quite daunting. Equally, you may want to test drive a specific make and model, especially if it's like a new potential, like, for example, Chinese brand that you've not heard of. You probably want to see it in the flesh and play with it and feel it and all that sort of good stuff. Angela, over to you. What's a top tip or a few tips for someone buying their first EV, used or new? I guess, like, what should they consider?
I mean, you've got to buy the car that matches your needs, not just the car that has the biggest range. But I would also say maybe look outside of the top brands. For so long we had Mercedes, Audi, BMW kind of being like the top ones, but now you see loads of other ones that are coming to market, even like coming back. You've got Peugeot and all those that are coming up with some really good, really good cars, probably some of them better than like an Audi, and cheaper. So ask yourself, what's my daily drive? Where will I charge? Do I have a home charger? Do I not have a home charger? Do I really need a car that gives me 500 miles? I mean, I don't even know if you have that. I think it's 450, kind of like the top ones, but miles range. Or do I just drive 15 miles a day to work back home? Then you probably don't need it. A couple of other ones is, we covered is, like with any car, obviously you want to check their service history, make sure it's been regularly checked. You don't want to buy a car that's been sitting for 6 months without being looked at or charged or anything like that. Also, actually, this one could be one that a lot of people miss, is if the car's been looked after and serviced properly, the battery might still be under warranty. So if you're buying a 5-6-year-old car, your battery is still under warranty. So if anything happens, then you're covered. But of course, there are other things. Obviously, preconditioning is pretty huge. That's probably one of the biggest things why I've switched to electric. Not only that it gives you, it's a great feature, but it's so convenient. Just imagine it's like -degrees outside. You're in bed. It's nice and cozy. You can set it all up from your phone, and then you jump in a warm car. I think that's pretty good.
You can do the opposite, right? Right now, you can cool it down, which is the main thing on a hot day like today.
Yeah, but also really cool. Insurance. Like when I look at cars, I always look at the insurance and cars that hold value over time. So if I do buy a car instead of leasing or anything like that, then I want to make sure that in 4 years, if I want to sell it, I can still get some cash back.
Nice. Thank you so much, guys. That brings us to the end of the kind of structured Q&A. I have got a short lightning round in the agenda for everyone. So I'm going to change it slightly because I think there's been a few questions around this. But what's the one used EV you would pick if you were, unlimited budget, all the bells and whistles? What would you go for? Angela, do you want to go first?
Oh, I already know. There's 2 of them. So for like kind of day to day, if money wasn't an issue, I'd go for the EQS 450 plus. That is my dream car. And if I could pick something else, it would be charge cars, because I love the old Ford Mustangs, and I don't know if you've seen the charge cars have the same design and they look incredible. So those are the 2 I would pick.
Nice. Ryan, what would you pick?
Yes, if money was no object, then the vehicle I would go for would be the Porsche Taycan. I think when we've talked about obviously the significant savings you can make via salary sacrifice, it would be the Taycan, because that compared to a new one. And usually these vehicles are very, very well specified. You know, you don't normally walk into a Porsche dealer and specify a standard vehicle. They come with a lot of tech already and a lot of good specifications. So that would be my go-to.
Nice. Cam?
I mean, if money's no object, I'm going for the Rolls-Royce Spectre. I'm maxing out the budget here. Yeah, maximum luxury, maximum price as well. No, if I wasn't trying to max out budget, I'd probably go for the Audi e-tron GT. I think that's a really nice looking car. Yeah, that would probably be my preference.
Nice. And Dinal?
I'm just not one for flashy cars, so I'm not going to max out the budget. I still think this is a flashy car. I love the look of it, and it can shift. Polestar 2.
Nice. Very cool. Thank you, guys. Appreciate
What
that.
about you, Gaurav?
I'm very fussy when it comes to cars, and I like the fact I work for a car company. It means I can change my car quite frequently, which is quite cool. I'm currently driving a Hyundai Kona, which might be boring to some people, but I get around 275, 300 miles on a charge in that, and it's just like ultimate commuter car. I absolutely love it, and I salary sacrifice it. So I think it costs me something nuts like £180 a month, including insurance. So in terms of like a car that does the job, it's the Kona for me, which is awesome. Nice. Anyway, I'm going to jump into some Q&A because there's quite a few questions, and I know Matt's been answering them. So thank you, Matt. Matt's in our BD team at the Electric Car Scheme. But I'm going to ask you a question, Cam, from Sam. That rhymes. That's fun. If you're buying a second-hand EV, say 3 years old, and plan to keep it for say 4 to 5 years, what percentage degradation are you likely to see at the end of that time? Also, are there any manufacturers where battery health looks better than others, i.e. is Nissan better than Renault? And how do other brands compare?
Okay.
Quite a big question.
Cool. Yeah. Let me take that in two halves then. So the major proportion of degradation actually happens within the first year to 18 months of an EV's lifespan. So after the 3-year mark, you can probably expect, again, this depends on how the vehicle is treated. So it depends on how the vehicle is charged. Things like rapid charging frequently will accelerate degradation. Again, the extent to which it affects degradation will depend on each model of car. But things like rapid charging and things like charging the car up to 100% and leaving it there regularly will also increase degradation. But if we're just talking average behavior, good treatment of the car, you're looking at anywhere from 1 to 1.5% degradation per year, I imagine, after that 3-year mark. So it's fairly minimal. So hopefully that answers the first half. The second half around manufacturers and which ones are better than the others. We're always very careful about what we say here and try not to single out any manufacturers in a negative sense. I can pull out some manufacturers that I think do a very good job of managing degradation. Tesla would be up there. Tesla have built very sophisticated battery packs for managing the temperature of the cells within those packs. So I'd single them out as having very good degradation management. Renault versus Nissan, probably wouldn't want to comment on that one. But in general, EVs are doing very well with degradation. I'd say overall, you're looking at somewhere between 1 to 2% per year. Obviously, that takes into account the accelerated degradation in that first year as well. And thereafter, after that first year, anywhere from 1 to 1.5%. Nice.
I guess it's quite detailed, right, per OEM. So
it depends. It massively depends on the OEM, and it massively depends on the technology even within that particular battery pack. OEMs have done a great job over the last 10 years of improving the technology that they're putting in those battery packs. So they're always improving. They're always engineering battery packs in a better way to manage that degradation. And through software as well, software improves, battery management system software improves. So things are getting better, and those degradation rates are only going to improve.
Nice. You've got one more question here, which I think is a very short answer. Is the battery charging health app available to download anywhere?
It is. If you go to our website, you should be able to download it from there. It'll take you to the app stores. It's available on both iOS and on Android.
And what's the business name again, just clearly?
ClearWatt. Very clear.
There we go. Perfect. Ryan, a question for you is well, someone just made a point, but around vehicle tax costs and expensive cars over £40,000. And how does that play a role in used EVs, more specifically?
Yeah, so going into this tax year, government decided for EVs and used EVs essentially to attract luxury car tax for any vehicle over £40,000. And essentially that is obviously it's apparent, it's a factor within your lease cost, but essentially it is built into the lease cost. So it's not something that is required to be paid as an upfront payment. It has been factored into the lease cost of the contract. So it's essentially it's spread amongst your gross payments before deduction with salary sacrifice.
Nice. It is quite a fiddly topic, the VED road tax stuff. We've got a lot of resources on the Electric Car Scheme's blog. So if you search there, you should be able to find some useful articles. It kind of breaks down how it all works as well. Thanks, Ryan. Over to Dinal. I think from your side, manufacturers do, and Cam might want to jump on this as well, but keen to get everyone speaking. Some OEMs inflate the range, and potentially on our website we have range figures that don't match the real world range. So why do they do that, and how can we help provide as much useful information as possible up front?
Yeah, it's a bit of a minefield, and if you're just using that manufacturer stated range, the issue is that is a consistent standard across all OEMs. And it's a very, very specific environment in which these are tested to create that consistency, which is great. I don't want to speak to whether manufacturers are deliberately inflating or whether in fact sometimes it can be a little bit more misleading, because as Cameron was alluding to, the battery degradation can vary so much with OEMs. Where we come in, again, it's about a minimum standard of battery health, but it's also about trying to give drivers that consumer facing, what matters, the battery degradation percentage, or actually how that impacts their range. That's what matters to drivers, really, especially if you're leasing and you're not worried about the residual value of a car. So where ECS will come in, and what we're trying to do so much more now, is give you the most accurate estimation on what range looks like now. And that's what you should be assessing as a driver who is trying to buy.
Yeah, just to add to that, manufacturers are not inflating those range values. They are mandated by law to carry out WLTP tests on those vehicles before they're allowed to sell them to the market. So as Dinal said there's a standardized set of test procedures that are carried out in very controlled conditions. And by nature, because it's so controlled, the range figures and the energy consumption figures that you get as a result of doing those tests are higher than what you will get in the real world. There's no wind. It's all flat roads. They don't turn the aircon on. They don't have any passengers in there. There's a whole host of reasons as to why those values are so much higher than what you get in the real world. But it's not that they're not doing this on purpose. They have their hands tied to some extent. They have to publish those values by law on their sales documentation. But what they can do is they can also provide real world range data as well. I have seen a number of manufacturers now starting to offer out tools on their websites, so sort of configurator tools that allow you to see what the real world range of that vehicle is under different conditions. I'll pick up one manufacturer that's doing a good job of that, Skoda. So if you go on Skoda's website now and you're looking at an EV, you can use their real world range tool that allows you to see exactly what real world range you'll get on that vehicle. So yeah, it's nothing deliberate on the part of the manufacturers. It's that they have their hands tied to some extent. And to be honest, regulation needs to change. Potentially we need an updated WLTP test that's more reflective of real world.
Nice, thanks, guys. One final question for Angela, just on mindset, I guess, on running out of charge versus running out of petrol, and any real examples you've had there, and how people should think about that piece.
So I've never really stressed about when it comes running out of range with an electric car. So that's just me. I'm quite relaxed about it because I know there's just so much out there. I know nothing is going to happen. So I'm quite confident, but I appreciate, the range anxiety is real. And I used to get questions around, what if I forget to charge? Well, did you forget to fill up your car? So it's the same kind of mindset, but I do think charging your car is easier than fueling up your car because you have more options. You don't have to go out of your way to a charging station unless you're going maybe on long journeys and you want a quick top up, or you don't have a home charger, then yes, you do. But if you do have a home charger, then you can utilize that and charge overnight. Or, I'm at work, I've got chargers outside. I could be plugging in right now and charging my car. Or if I go to the gym, there's a charger there. So it actually is much easier to charge an electric car than to fuel up. And I still remember back in the day when I used to drive a Ford, a nice car. I'll be like, oh, I've got to go out. I'm going to the office tomorrow, and I need to fuel up, and I have to get out of bed and go out up, and so it's like, to me, driving an electric car made my life easier. So I don't know if that answers the question. I think it's just a mindset switch.
Dinal, anything to add?
Yeah, so this is where my background in ZapMap comes in. The charging infrastructure in this country, public charging infrastructure, and this is what speaks to range anxiety. Fair enough, if you're concerned about the amount of range that the car will give you and the frequency of how often you will have to charge, that's a valid concern. That is getting better and better and better, obviously, with improving battery technology. But with regard to range anxiety, where do we worry that we're going to run out of petrol? It's typically on the motorway. Every single service station on UK motorways that have a petrol pump will have EV chargers, right? So it's kind of this almost false economy kind of misconception about how many are actually available. There are so many. The quality of and reliability of those chargers gets better and better and better and better. Fun fact for you: the ratio of EVs on the road to chargers is better than the ratio of ICE cars to petrol pumps. And that's, even though more and more EVs are going to get sold, that's more and more chargers are being put in the ground. So this anxiety about will I run out of charge before I get to a charger is very, very misplaced. It's fake news.
And just for that, to give you an example, UK versus Europe, when I was in Spain, there was only one single charger, 50 kilowatt. By the way, I have not seen a rapid charger in Spain. And there was only one 50 kilowatt charger in like 40 kilometers radius. So compared to UK, that is pretty bad.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of improvement there. I'm going to have to wrap us up. Sorry, guys. I just realized we are at the end of time. So thank you so much to our panel for attending. It's been a really, really good conversation. I've also seen in the chat there are a number of electric car scheme specific questions. So the best thing I'd recommend is, if you are in an active conversation with someone at the electric car scheme, reach out to them. Happily, they will respond and get in touch with you guys. If you are interested in looking at any of the used cars we have available through our scheme, they are available again on our website. We have around 500 used cars in stock at the moment. So if you go to electriccarscheme.com, in the top right, there's a button, calculate my savings. You can then look at all the used cars, photos, imperfections, range, all that good stuff we talked about is available there. And yeah, if you want to take any other actions or, reach out to the panel, we will send around an email with a recording for this webinar, and, happy to help there. So just want to say thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice sunny afternoon, and catch you all later. Cheers. Thank you
So much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.